Before I begin, let me ask you something quietly and honestly. How much of your life have you lived for yourself? And how much have you lived trying to satisfy the eyes watching you? From the moment we learn to speak, we are taught to listen to opinions, to expectations, to judgments dressed as advice. We shrink when they frown, we glow when they approve, and somewhere in between, we lose the sound of our own voice. But tonight, I invite you to pause the noise of the world and lean into a truth that may feel uncomfortable at first. The most powerful decision you will ever make is to stop chasing approval and start honoring your own worth. Because the day you learn to ignore everyone and truly value yourself is the day your real life begins. The world is never quiet. It hums with opinions in the morning and shouts expectations by night. It tells you how to look, how to speak, how to succeed, how to belong. It measures your worth in likes, applause, salaries, and approval. And if you are not careful, you will begin to believe that this noise is guidance. You will mistake volume for truth. But the noise of the world is restless. It changes with trends, with moods, with convenience. What they praise today, they may question tomorrow. What they reject today, they may celebrate later. If you build your identity on that shifting ground, you will always feel unstable, always adjusting, always chasing. Yet beneath all that clamor, there is another voice, softer, steadier, patient. It does not scream for attention because it does not need to compete. It is the voice within. It speaks when you are alone, when the lights are off, when no one is clapping or criticizing. It tells you what feels right, even when it is not popular. It nudges you toward paths that may not impress others, but fulfill you deeply. This voice does not measure your value by comparison. It simply reminds you of who you are. The struggle begins when these two voices collide. The world says, be realistic. The voice within says, be brave. The world says, fit in. The voice within whispers, stand out. The world lists your flaws. The voice within remembers your strength. And in those moments, you must choose which one will lead you. One will make you acceptable. The other will make you authentic. Listening to your inner voice requires courage because it often asks you to walk alone. It asks you to disappoint people who prefer the smaller version of you. It asks you to trust yourself when there is no guarantee of applause. But understand this, peace does not come from pleasing the crowd. It comes from alignment with yourself. When your actions match your inner truth, there is a quiet confidence that no criticism can shake. The noise of the world is external and endless. If you try to answer every opinion, you will exhaust yourself. If you try to correct every misunderstanding, you will lose your focus. Not every comment deserves your energy. Not every judgment deserves your response. Sometimes strength is found in silence. Sometimes power is choosing not to engage. Your inner voice, however, grows stronger the more you honor it. Each time you trust it, you build self-respect. Each time you act according to your values, you deepen your confidence. And slowly, the world's noise begins to fade into the background. It does not disappear, but it no longer controls you. In the end, the question is simple. Will you live by echoes or by essence? The noise may be loud, but it is temporary. The voice within may be quiet, but it is enduring. When you choose to follow it, you are not ignoring the world out of defiance. You are simply refusing to let it define you. And that is where true freedom begins. There is a hunger that many people carry quietly, a craving so subtle that it disguises itself as ambition, kindness, or humility. It is the need for approval. At first, it feels harmless. You dress a certain way to be complimented. You speak carefully to avoid criticism. You choose paths that earn applause instead of fulfillment. And every time someone nods in agreement or offers praise, you feel a small rush of relief, a fleeting sense of worth. But like any addiction, the relief never lasts. Soon, you need more approval, more validation, more reassurance just to feel steady again. The danger of living for approval is that it places your value in other people's hands. When they are pleased, you feel worthy. When they are silent or disapproving, you begin to doubt yourself. Your confidence rises and falls depending on someone else's mood. That is a heavy price to pay. You start editing your personality to avoid rejection. You shrink your dreams to make others comfortable. You silence your truth to maintain acceptance. Slowly, without realizing it, you trade authenticity for applause. Approval becomes expensive because it costs you your freedom. It costs you the courage to say no. It costs you the ability to disappoint someone without feeling guilty. It costs you the clarity to make decisions based on your own values. You become so focused on being liked that you forget to ask whether you even like the life you are building. You measure success by how many people approve, not by how aligned you feel inside. And the truth is, approval is unpredictable. People's opinions shift, their expectations grow. The same crowd that praises you today may question you tomorrow. If you rely on their validation, you will live in constant anxiety, always performing, always proving, always adjusting. You will become exhausted from trying to maintain an image instead of nurturing your essence. Freedom begins the moment you realize that not everyone needs to understand you. Not everyone needs to agree with your choices. Some people will approve of you only when you are convenient, only when you fit their narrative. But your life is not a performance designed to satisfy an audience. It is a journey meant to fulfill your purpose. When you release the addiction to approval, something powerful happens. You begin to make decisions from conviction instead of fear. You speak with honesty rather than calculation. You accept that criticism is not a measure of your worth and praise is not proof of your value. You stop chasing claps and start building character. You learn that self-respect feels deeper and steadier than external validation ever could. Approval may feel sweet, but self-acceptance is sustaining. One is temporary and fragile. The other is solid and enduring. When you value yourself, you no longer beg for permission to exist fully. You no longer negotiate your identity for acceptance. You understand that being true to yourself may cost you some applause, but it will save your peace. And that is a price worth paying. There comes a moment in every life when the path narrows and the crowd thins out. At first, you may not notice it. The laughter grows distant, the encouragement fades, and the familiar faces that once surrounded you begin to disappear. It is in that quiet space that many people feel afraid. We are taught that success is loud and supported, that strength is confirmed by numbers, that if no one is walking beside us, we must be going the wrong way. But some roads were never meant to be crowded. Some journeys demand solitude, not as punishment, but as preparation. To walk alone requires a different kind of bravery. It is easy to move with the crowd. Their presence softens doubt and shields you from criticism. When many believe what you believe, you feel secure. But when you choose a vision that others cannot yet see, you step into uncertainty without applause. You move forward without constant reassurance. And in those moments, fear whispers that turning back would be easier. It would be simpler to blend in, to agree, to settle. Yet something deeper urges you onward. Walking alone does not mean you are abandoned. It means you are aligned. It means you are no longer willing to betray your own convictions for the comfort of company. There will be evenings when the silence feels heavy and mornings when doubt tries to greet you before hope does. You may question your decisions. You may wonder whether isolation is a sign of failure, but growth often feels lonely because transformation is personal. No one else can do the inner work for you. When you dare to stand apart, you begin to discover who you truly are without influence. Without constant opinion shaping your choices, your thoughts become clearer. Without comparison clouding your judgment, your confidence becomes steadier. You start making decisions based on values instead of validation. And with each independent step, your self-trust deepens. The courage to walk alone also teaches resilience. When you cannot rely on external encouragement, you learn to encourage yourself. When no one understands your dream, you learn to believe in it without explanation. You build an inner foundation that is not shaken by temporary rejection. Solitude becomes a teacher rather than a threat. It shows you that your strength was never dependent on the presence of others, and eventually something remarkable happens. The path that once felt empty begins to feel empowering. You realize that you are not alone in weakness, but alone in purpose. You understand that the crowd was never meant to validate your direction. It was meant to test your determination. By choosing to continue despite the silence, you prove to yourself that your belief is stronger than your fear. Walking alone is not about isolation for its own sake. It is about loyalty to your own truth. It is about trusting that even if no one else understands your journey, it still matters. The road may be quiet, but your steps are steady. And sometimes the strongest statement you can make is not spoken at all. It is simply the courage to keep walking. There will always be someone ready to evaluate you, to measure your choices against their standards, to weigh your dreams against their fears, to decide, without invitation, whether you are worthy of praise or deserving of doubt. The world is full of judges who never applied for the role, critics who never built what you are building, and spectators who confuse observation with authority. If you are not careful, you will begin to stand on trial in a courtroom that never closes, defending your existence to people who never earned the right to question it. But your worth is not a debate. It is not a topic for public discussion. It is not a poll to be voted on. It is not a performance to be scored. Your value does not rise when someone applauds you, and it does not fall when someone disapproves. It is not fragile like glass, shattering at the first sign of criticism. It is foundational, steady, and inherent. Too many people grow up believing they must prove they deserve space in this world. They overachieve to be accepted. They overextend to be loved. They overexplain to be understood. And when their efforts are not met with appreciation, they begin to question themselves. They ask, "Am I enough?" as if their existence requires confirmation. But worth is not something you earn through exhaustion. It is not a trophy handed out for perfection. It is something you carry simply because you are here. When someone doubts you, it does not subtract from your value. When someone misunderstands you, it does not redefine your identity. When someone walks away, it does not mean you are lacking. Their opinion is a reflection of their perception, not a revelation of your worth. You must learn to separate feedback from identity, rejection from reality. Not every closed door is a verdict. Not every criticism is truth. There is power in deciding that you will no longer participate in arguments about your value. You do not have to convince everyone of your intelligence. You do not have to prove your kindness by sacrificing your boundaries. You do not have to shrink your light so others feel taller. The moment you stop negotiating your self-respect, you step into a different kind of strength. Knowing your worth changes how you move. You no longer beg for attention. You choose where to give yours. You no longer tolerate disrespect to avoid loneliness. You protect your peace. You no longer chase validation. You stand rooted in self-awareness. There is a quiet dignity in someone who understands that their value is constant, even when circumstances are not. Self-worth is not arrogance. It is not loud or boastful. It is calm and grounded. It is the steady belief that you deserve kindness, opportunity, and respect without having to perform for them. It is the refusal to let temporary opinions dictate permanent beliefs about yourself. When you truly accept that your worth is not up for debate, something shifts inside you. You stop defending your existence and start living it. You stop asking for permission to take up space and begin to stand fully in it. And in that certainty, you find a freedom that no external approval could ever provide. Rejection has a way of arriving unannounced. It shows up in unopened doors, unanswered messages, opportunities that slip through your fingers, and faces that turn away without explanation. At first, it feels personal. It feels like a verdict stamped across your effort, your talent, your heart. You replay the moment in your mind, searching for what you could have done differently. You question your abilities, you question your timing, sometimes you even question your worth. But rejection is not always a reflection of inadequacy. Often, it is a redirection disguised as disappointment. Not every closed door is meant to be forced open. Some doors close because what lies behind them is too small for the person you are becoming. Yet in the moment, it is hard to see that. Pain narrows your vision. You focus on what you lost rather than what you are being guided toward. You hold on to the no so tightly that you miss the quiet invitation to something better aligned with your growth. Rejection teaches resilience in a way acceptance never can. When you are applauded, you feel affirmed. When you are rejected, you are refined. It strips away illusions. It reveals how deeply you believe in yourself without external support. If your confidence collapses at the first sign of disapproval, rejection exposes that weakness. But if you choose to stand anyway, to try again, to trust your path despite the setback, rejection becomes a strengthening force. There is also wisdom in understanding that not everyone is meant to journey with you. Some people are present for a chapter, not the whole story. When they step away, it may hurt, but it also creates space. Space for relationships that understand you. Space for opportunities that value you. Space for environments where you do not have to constantly prove yourself. What feels like loss can be preparation. Consider how many breakthroughs are born from refusal. The job you did not get pushes you to build your own path. The relationship that ended forces you to rediscover your independence. The opportunity denied directs you toward a passion you might have ignored. In hindsight, many rejections reveal themselves as turning points. They reroute you away from comfort and toward calling. This does not mean rejection will not sting. It will. You are human. You care. You invest your time and heart into things that matter to you. But pain is not proof of failure. It is proof of courage. It means you tried. It means you stepped forward instead of hiding in safety. And every time you rise after rejection, you strengthen your belief that your journey is bigger than a single no. When you begin to see rejection as redirection, you respond differently. Instead of asking, "Why wasn't I chosen?" you ask, "Where am I being guided?" Instead of shrinking, you adjust. Instead of giving up, you grow. You trust that the path unfolding before you may not look like the one you imagined, but it is shaping you into someone wiser, stronger, and more aligned with your purpose. Sometimes rejection is not the end of your story. It is simply the hand that turns the page. There is a quiet freedom that arrives the day you stop fighting yourself. Not the kind of freedom that comes from applause or achievement, but the kind that settles gently into your spirit when you decide you are no longer your own enemy. For years, many people wrestle with who they are. They compare their reflection to someone else's highlight. They criticize their flaws more harshly than any outsider ever could. They carry invisible lists of everything they wish they could change. And in doing so, they imprison themselves in constant dissatisfaction. Self-acceptance is not resignation. It is not giving up on growth or settling for less. It is the honest acknowledgement of who you are in this moment, without shame. It is looking at your strengths with gratitude and your weaknesses with compassion. It is understanding that you are a work in progress and still worthy of respect along the way. When you accept yourself, you stop wasting energy pretending to be someone else. So much exhaustion comes from performance. Smiling when you feel uncertain, nodding when you disagree, hiding the parts of you that feel different or misunderstood. You adjust your tone, your dreams, even your personality to match what you believe will be accepted. But performance is heavy. It demands constant maintenance, and the more you perform, the further you drift from your true self. Self-acceptance lifts that weight. It allows you to speak without rehearsing every word in fear. It allows you to admit you do not have all the answers. It allows you to acknowledge past mistakes without letting them define your future. When you accept yourself, you no longer need to overcompensate to prove your value. You stand in your truth calmly, without aggression and without apology. There is also freedom in forgiving yourself. Many people carry regret like a permanent label. They replay old decisions, relive old failures, and punish themselves long after the moment has passed. But growth requires grace. You cannot evolve if you are chained to yesterday's version of yourself. Self-acceptance means recognizing that you did the best you could with the knowledge you had at the time. It means allowing yourself to learn without condemning yourself for not knowing sooner. As acceptance deepens, comparison loses its grip. You begin to understand that your journey is uniquely yours. Someone else's speed does not diminish your progress. Someone else's success does not erase your potential. When you accept your own timing, your own path, and your own process, envy softens into inspiration. You celebrate others without questioning your own place. The most powerful shift happens internally. The voice that once criticized begins to encourage. The doubt that once dominated begins to quiet. You treat yourself with the same kindness you so easily offer others. And in that kindness, confidence grows naturally. Not loud or boastful, but steady and rooted. Freedom found in self-acceptance is subtle but profound. It is waking up without the urge to hide. It is making decisions that align with your values rather than your insecurities. It is living without the constant fear of being found out as imperfect, because you already know you are imperfect and you have chosen to value yourself anyway. And in that choice, you discover a peace that no external validation could ever give. There is a quiet freedom that arrives the day you stop fighting yourself, not the kind of freedom that comes from applause or achievement, but the kind that settles gently into your spirit when you decide you are no longer your own enemy. For years, many people wrestle with who they are. They compare their reflection to someone else's highlight. They criticize their flaws more harshly than any outsider ever could. They carry invisible lists of everything they wish they could change. And in doing so, they imprison themselves in constant dissatisfaction. Self-acceptance is not resignation. It is not giving up on growth or settling for less. It is the honest acknowledgement of who you are in this moment without shame. It is looking at your strengths with gratitude and your weaknesses with compassion. It is understanding that you are a work in progress and still worthy of respect along the way. When you accept yourself, you stop wasting energy pretending to be someone else. So much exhaustion comes from performance, smiling when you feel uncertain, nodding when you disagree, hiding the parts of you that feel different or misunderstood. You adjust your tone, your dreams, even your personality to match what you believe will be accepted. But performance is heavy. It demands constant maintenance. And the more you perform, the further you drift from your true self. Self-acceptance lifts that weight. It allows you to speak without rehearsing every word in fear. It allows you to admit you do not have all the answers. It allows you to acknowledge past mistakes without letting them define your future. When you accept yourself, you no longer need to overcompensate to prove your value. You stand in your truth calmly, without aggression and without apology. There is also freedom in forgiving yourself. Many people carry regret like a permanent label. They replay old decisions, relive old failures, and punish themselves long after the moment has passed. But growth requires grace. You cannot evolve if you are chained to yesterday's version of yourself. Self-acceptance means recognizing that you did the best you could with the knowledge you had at the time. It means allowing yourself to learn without condemning yourself for not knowing sooner. As acceptance deepens, comparison loses its grip. You begin to understand that your journey is uniquely yours. Someone else's speed does not diminish your progress. Someone else's success does not erase your potential. When you accept your own timing, your own path, and your own process, envy softens into inspiration. You celebrate others without questioning your own place. The most powerful shift happens internally. The voice that once criticized begins to encourage. The doubt that once dominated begins to quiet. You treat yourself with the same kindness you so easily offer others. And in that kindness, confidence grows naturally, not loud or boastful, but steady and rooted. Freedom found in self-acceptance is subtle but profound. It is waking up without the urge to hide. It is making decisions that align with your values rather than your insecurities. It is living without the constant fear of being found out as imperfect, because you already know you are imperfect, and you have chosen to value yourself anyway. And in that choice, you discover a peace that no external validation could ever give. Criticism will find you no matter how carefully you live. It will arrive when you try something new, when you succeed, and even when you simply exist in your truth. Some criticism will be constructive, offered with sincerity. Some will be careless, spoken from jealousy, insecurity, or misunderstanding. If you allow every critical word to pierce you deeply, you will spend your life wounded by opinions. But if you learn to examine criticism without absorbing its poison, it can become one of your greatest teachers. The first step is learning not to react immediately. Criticism often triggers emotion before reason. Your instinct may be to defend yourself, to argue, or to retreat. Yet strength is found in pause. When you pause, you create space between what was said and what you choose to believe. Not every comment deserves a place in your mind. Some words are merely projections of another person's internal struggle. There is a difference between destructive criticism and useful feedback. Destructive criticism attacks who you are. Useful feedback addresses what you did. One tries to diminish you, the other aims to help you grow. When you learn to separate the two, you regain control. Instead of hearing, "You are a failure," you ask, "Is there something here I can improve?" Instead of internalizing insult, you extract insight. Turning criticism into inner power requires emotional maturity. It means understanding that being corrected does not make you weak. It means accepting that growth sometimes comes wrapped in discomfort. If someone points out a genuine flaw, you have a choice: deny it and remain stagnant, or acknowledge it and evolve. The willingness to improve is not an admission of inadequacy. It is evidence of strength. At the same time, you must protect your self-worth. Not every critic has credibility. Consider the source. Does this person understand your journey? Do they want to see you succeed? Are they offering perspective or simply venting their own frustration? When you evaluate criticism wisely, you prevent yourself from being shaped by voices that do not deserve influence. There is also power in resilience. Each time you endure criticism without collapsing, you strengthen your inner foundation. You begin to realize that words cannot define you unless you allow them to. You understand that discomfort does not destroy you, it refines you. Over time, what once hurt deeply becomes manageable. You grow thicker skin without hardening your heart. Criticism can also clarify your vision. When others doubt you, it forces you to examine your commitment. Do you believe in your path strongly enough to continue despite disapproval? If the answer is yes, criticism becomes fuel. It sharpens your focus. It strengthens your determination. It reminds you why you began. Inner power is not built in comfort. It is built in challenge. When you choose to learn from criticism rather than crumble beneath it, you transform negativity into momentum. You prove to yourself that your confidence is not fragile. You show that your growth is not dependent on constant praise. In the end, criticism does not have to be your enemy. It can be a mirror, a lesson, even a stepping stone. When you respond with wisdom instead of insecurity, you take back control. And in that control, you discover a strength that no critic can take away.